Hello. This video complements your classroom discussion and reading on course of action analysis by demonstrating what an operational level wargame might look like. The intent is to help you visualize the process, enable your grasp of major components of wargaming. What you will see is only one way, but is not the only way. Watch, listen, and prepare your questions for follow-on discussion. Thank you.
In this video, we'll demonstrate steps 1 through 12 of a manual wargame at the operational level of war. In the interest of time, it will only cover one turn of a wargame, and much of the discussion you will see is abbreviated. So realize that in an actual wargame, the discussions and moves would be more detailed and lengthy. Our scenario is World War II's Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa in 1942. The first step in course of action analysis using a manual wargame is to gather the participants. The Joint Planning Group Leader, or JPG Leader, gathers representatives for all of the joint functions and the major subordinate components and commands. He also assigns an experienced wargamer to be the facilitator who runs the wargame. The JPG Leader also identifies a recorder who keeps notes of the actions and decisions and updates any matrices. The red cell is a cross-functional team typically led by an intelligence representative who will role-play a thinking and reactive opponent.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Rapone. I'm the JPG lead, and I've assembled this planning team.
I'm the recorder, and I'm responsible for capturing the data of this wargame.
So we have various JTF staff sections represented here, right behind me, along with C2, movement maneuver, intel, fires, protection, and information and sustainment.
We represent the subordinate functional commands, including land, air, maritime, SOF. Most of us are also LNO planners from our respective commands.
We represent the other various unified action partners, including coalition members, interagency, and supporting component commands. Some of us come from the staff, and some of us are LNOs.
I come from the red cell. I'll be working my way as the Op 4 for the planning exercise, and I come from the intel staff.
Step 2 is gathering the tools. This is where the participants bring all relevant information and ensure that they have reach-back capability if required to get more. Examples include deployment timelines, movement and consumption and casualty rates, and correlation of forces factors. Ideally, the group has already developed its evaluation criteria and it is available, although it may be further refined during the course of action analysis. The recommendation is not to proceed with the analysis without having some evaluation criteria.
All right, let's review the tools that we brought. Number one, we have the map of the JOA, each of with the enemy and friendly disposition. Red icons represent the threat, blue icons Navy, yellow icons air, and white icons are land forces. We also have all of the products from the MDMP. Those are the specified and applied tasks, the commander's guidance, mission, assumptions, evaluation criteria, and our wargaming recording matrix.
I have created and am displaying the COA analysis matrix, and I will use it to record all of the main observations from this wargame discussion.
Okay, so all the joint functions, we've completed our staff estimates for each COA. We've got our relevant data for units, capabilities, deployment timelines, and the sustainment requirements. We're prepared to review it as appropriate.
The component representatives have also completed staff estimates for each of the courses of action, and we focus on the concept of operation and tasks assigned for the component. These include best estimates on forces and capabilities required to accomplish assigned tasks within the time required. These concepts have been coordinated with the components during parallel planning and represent their best estimates on how they would execute assigned tasks.
In step 3, the JPG leader selects the most appropriate wargame method. Methods include deliberate timeline, phasing, critical events, major efforts, lines of effort, or it can even be terrain focused. He then briefs the rules, the sequence of the wargame, and the participants' roles and responsibilities, and any assumptions regarding start dates or event triggers.
Good. We're doing a manual war game using the key event method. We are starting at the D-Day assault landings through D+3 for turn 1. Turn 2 will be D+4 to D10. We'll start with the components maritime, air, and land, and then the joint functions intel, C2, info, movement maneuver, fires, protection, and sustainment. The facilitator will control the war game, and the recorder will capture key discussions. I'll be followed by the two who will brief the enemy course of action.
In step 4, the intel or red cell representatives set the context by discussing what enemy course of action they will wargame against. Typically, it is the enemy's most likely COA. The other option is the enemy's most dangerous COA. Time permitting, you would wargame against both, and the briefer would cover the entire enemy COA. The intel rep would also discuss specific details on the enemy situation, capabilities, limitations, and timelines for movement, their concept of operations, and other relevant information.
We'll conduct this war game against the enemy course of action 1, which is a conventional defense course of action, and it's the most likely course of action. In this course of action, we have Spain that remains neutral throughout this event. And at this point in time, Axis forces remain still in Libya, facing the British 8th Army in Egypt. The Axis only has service and supply troops in their rear in Tunisia. The Vichy forces, the forces that we are concerned with the most right now, continue to defend in Tunisia, Algeria, and French Morocco. I've depicted the major disposition of enemy locations and strength in the icons arrayed before you on the map. For the French army that's allocated across North Africa, there are 14 divisions, with 7 divisions of 55,000 troops in Morocco, another 7 divisions of around 50,000 troops in Algeria. The force itself is assessed to be poorly equipped, have a fair degree of training, and they do have some professional leadership embedded within. However, due to the situation, the leadership's sense of loyalty to the Vichy France is considered questionable. The French Navy, based out of Casablanca, is a professional force of 10 warships and 11 submarines. There is 1 battleship assessed within the Navy that is currently immobile and still in port. The French Air Force is consisting of 2 fighters and 2 bomber groups, totaling around 500 aircraft. They are based all throughout North Africa, with a balanced distribution of forces within Morocco and Algeria. Of note, half of that force is considered modernized and comparable to Allied Air Force capabilities. As I mentioned earlier, the loyalty of the North African French force leadership to Vichy France and the terms of the armistice that they have with Germany is questionable. This adds to the uncertainty of the French forces' unity, the coordination among the services themselves, and the level of agreement with the decisions and loyalty to the senior leaders that are commanding the respective services. Because of this leadership, the questionable leadership and loyalty to the Vichy government, command, control, and synchronization of Vichy forces may be problematic. We assess that the Vichy French air and ground forces will resist our landings. However, this resistance is assessed to widely range between light token resistance to entrench a vigorous defense based on the local commanders' willingness to fight and their own assessment of their situation. We assess that the French naval forces will not engage or take actions against Allied forces based on their desire to preserve their fleet. Pending questions, I'll be followed by the operational plan.
In step 5, the lead ops planner briefs the major points of the friendly course of action to make sure that all of the participants know the COA being analyzed. The ops rep, like the intel rep, would continue to discuss specific details of the COA. The purpose of both briefings is to remind the participants of the details of the COAs.
This is course of action 1, the Mediterranean landings. In sum, it will see 2 task forces, a western and an eastern, land and sea ports at Oran, Algiers and Beaune. Thereafter, we'll establish lodgements from which we will consolidate our combat power before pushing east to seize Tunisia.
In step 6, the leader designates the start point for the war game and sets the stage by explaining any actions or assumptions that occurred up to that point, including start strengths, positioning, etc.
We are starting at the assault phase because the movement phase is essentially the same for both courses of action. We have assumed passage through the Straits of Gibraltar. It is now D-Day, and this turn will be to D+3. Place your icons on the map at the start positions, which they already are, when it is your turn, and be prepared to discuss their strengths, timing, and concept of operations, including assigned tasks.
In step 7, the participants place unit icons at the start locations. A technique is to indicate on the icon the unit's strength or composition, and then update the matrices and charts with the start point data to include actions, tasks, and statuses. In step 8, the Intel representative reviews all relevant priority intelligence requirements and indicators and warnings of enemy actions and the status at the start of the war game.
Okay, this is the disposition of forces of North African French forces at D-Day. Spain continues to maintain its neutrality, and there has been no movement of Axis forces into Libya. The French still remain in garrisons and inside of the major harbors, and at this point we have operational and tactical surprise.
In step 9, the facilitator starts the war game with the action taken by the entity that has the initiative. In this case, it is the Allied forces. However, in other situations, the enemy could start the turn. Each joint function would then brief their tasks, statuses, capabilities, and limitations. Much like the original action and reaction discussion, the counteraction follows the same procedure and focuses on additional or more detailed discussion on the actions to take as counteractions to the enemy's reaction. This may be where changes or decision points and branch plans or other actions are identified. The action, reaction, and counteraction cycle or turns should be repeated as many times as necessary to get through the event or phase or the entire COA.
We'll start this operation because we have the initiative.
Gentlemen, naval forces consist of 6 battleships, 15 cruisers with 5 fleet carriers, 7 escort carriers, destroyers, submarines, auxiliaries, and associated transports. So for the mission of naval forces up to D+3, we're going to be tasked with protection of shipping to safeguard overseas movements, amphibious operations in support of the landings, both at Oran, Algiers, and Beaune. We're going to be conducting freedom of navigation to maintain sea lines of communication, both north and back to the States. In order to accomplish these missions, we're providing a fleet to conduct anti-submarine warfare in the Atlantic, countering the French submarine threat out of Casablanca, providing anti-submarine warfare to protect assault ships and convoys coming to and through Gibraltar and to the landing sites. We'll be providing naval surface fire support for the landings and air defense of landing forces. Additionally, we'll be conducting mine sweeping to enable the landings. The 12 carriers, consisting of 4 U.S. and 8 British carriers, will be providing air cover to the assaults and naval surface forces and shipping until the air force is being able to be established ashore. A surface covering force will be remaining in the Med here to guard against the Axis and Vichy naval forces. The staff to operate the captured ports and to maintain underwater defenses and local patrols will be arriving with the second echelon on D+2. And we're finally tasked with conducting long-range reconnaissance in conjunction with the air forces as necessary. So Torch is predominantly an amphibious operation where the eastward advance across the Mediterranean will only be possible through the employment of sufficient port protection, convoys, and then landing craft and beaches, as well as counteraction to prevent interference of land movement by the hostile naval forces.
What happens if we fail to take the port of Algiers?
In conjunction with the land forces request, we'll have 3 options or decision points depending on the landing, or correction, of the location of the French resistance. Our first option will be shifting the priority of the naval surface fire support. The second will be to shift the priority of our carrier-based air from Algiers. And the third will be a combination of the 2.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Now that the Navy has got us there safely, the hard work starts. The assault phase is characterised by surprise and speed, whereby simultaneous assaults occur at Oran with the Western Task Force and at Algiers and Bone by the Eastern Task Force. At Oran, a reinforced US Infantry Division will conduct 2 pre-dawn landings, each by a regimental combat team, one just to the west of Oran and one to the east. On orders, they'll be followed by a second echelon of a regimental combat team. In total, we're committing 4 combat teams to this operation. Their objective is to initially secure the port of Oran, followed by the seizure of 2 key airfields to the south and southeast of Oran. It is assessed that the objectives will be met by D+3. Moving on to Algiers, the assault force again comprises of a reinforced division, this time under command of the British 78th Division, with a regimental combat team from the US 34th Division attached for the duration. It should be noted that a senior American representative of the Allied Commander-in-Chief will be accompanying this force to facilitate negotiations with Vichy French who may be suffering a crisis of conscience. On D-Day, there will be 3 pre-dawn landings by regimental combat teams, size forces, 15 miles west of Algiers and 11 miles to the east of Algiers, both by British forces. The objectives once again is to secure the port of Algiers as well as securing both nearby airfields of Masson Blanchet and Hassan Day. Further east at Bone, a multinational force of approximately 1 regimental combat team size, comprising 1 US Ranger battalion supported by British elements, will conduct a pre-dawn landing in the vicinity of Cape de Garde, just north of the city of Bone, and secure the more lightly defended port of Bone with its airfield some 6.5 miles south of the city. It is anticipated that the balance of the force will arrive in a second convoy on D+2.
Thank you.
All right, the air component. We're going to be providing air cover and support for that initial assault. We'll protect bases and communications, and then we'll support the follow-on land operations from there. The assaults at Oran and at Algiers will be supported by those carrier-based operations that we talked about earlier, and we'll do that until about D+3 when we expect to have moved inland to those air bases. Let's see, relief for those carrier-based operations will be from Gibraltar, and bombers will be flown in from the United Kingdom, as well as a reserve of long-range fighters. Those will be established in the UK in the event that Gibraltar is compromised. And then remember that air support is so critical to the mission success that we're going to need the highest priority in order to have mission success.
Thank you. Now we'll go through D plus D+3 by the joint functions. Intel will be first. Intel.
Okay. There are currently 5 standing priority intelligence requirements, and we'll discuss their source of collection at the end. PIR number 1 is where are the exact locations of enemy defenses to include key fortifications and obstacles that can affect the assault landing sites. PIR number 2 is what is the composition and disposition of French land forces capable of conducting a defense against the assault landing sites. PIR number 3 is what is the status of naval activity at Casablanca and Toulon. PIR number 4 is what's the assessment of key French unit commanders to the Vichy French leaders and their forces. And PIR number 5 is where are the key communication nodes required to coordinate between the French commanders and their field forces. The major collection means used will be in the initial phase human intelligence from French resistance and source operations, the insertion of commando teams for early entry preparation, aerial recce
from the RAF, signals intelligence from both tactical and national collection.
Thank you. That was the Allied action from D to D+3. Red Cell, what are your reactions?
So for Red Cell actions, no doubt the garrisons located in the vicinities of Bone, Tangiers, and Casablanca will be caught by surprise. However, our defensive forces are already established, and once the Allied troops hit the shore, we'll be able to provide some resistance pretty quickly. Important to note that the opposition forces do not have a capability to prevent any of the landings here or drive the Allies back into the sea. So it is important to note during our planning exercises. Now in the ports, what will happen is we will launch every available ship that we have in order to block or obstruct the ports to keep the vessels from coming in. Our ground forces and the garrisons, they'll occupy those blocking positions, and any road that leads from the beach to an airfield will be blocked as well. Now the mobile reserves and the counterattack forces, they'll remain in place at the garrisons until they receive the order to attack. Once that order to attack is given or to advance forward, you can expect ground and air attacks, counterattacks. Now also another important note here is that these attacks will not be coordinated, because what we have is a breakdown in loyalties and coordination between the French forces, and it's very fragmented in their loyalties. So we'll have to deal with one being more aggressive than the other. The French naval forces, especially located in Casablanca and Toulon, they will not sortie at all, because they realize that the Allied forces are a lot more superior than theirs, so they'll more than likely stay in place. Lastly, Axis forces do not have any capability to interdict at all. So what we have standing now is what we know at the time. Any questions?
Oh, thank you very much. All right, let's now go over Allied counter-reaction. Land, we'll start with you.
We cannot change our ground composition force after the assault has started. However, we have one decision point to request naval and air to shift the priority of support and fires from an assault area to another, depending on the level of resistance we find. And the second decision point is to shift the second echelon to alternate landing features as required.
In conjunction with the land forces request, we've got 3 options or decision points depending on the location of the French resistance. The first will be to shift priority of the naval surface fire support from one of the other landing sites. Second option would be to shift priority of the carrier-based air. And our third option would be some combination thereof: partial carrier-based air and naval surface fire support.
In step 10, members record the results and update their estimates, graphics, and matrices, and capture the important notes for each turn. They will use this data to update the plan and to populate the evaluation criteria used in course of action comparison. In steps 11 and 12, the JPG leader or the facilitator, depending on the methodology used, will determine if the war game is complete, or if another event or phase within that COA will be analyzed.
All right, it looks like we're going to need a branch plan for failure to take the port. Recorder, please put that down on the paper. We're not going to handle that right now. We're going to wait until after we're complete with this round, or excuse me, this course of action, and then we'll explore that branch plan later. Thanks. All right, that completes this portion of the course of action. Make sure you're capturing the results and updating your estimates. Now we'll pick up on turn 2, D4 plus, or excuse me, D plus 4 to D plus 15.
For steps 13 and 14, if time permits, the friendly COA should be run again against other enemy COAs. In this example, that would be the most dangerous COA.
Let's go ahead and reset the board and war game against enemy COA 2, the most dangerous, and continue. Once we complete the war game and the results captured in our estimates and other documents, COA analysis is finished. This will begin COA comparison, with the exception of us working on the branch plan if we continue to have time. Everybody clear? Clear. Roger.
In step 15, once the friendly COA has been war gamed against all enemy COAs, Participants will update the results just as they did in Step 10. In Steps 16 and 17, the participants will repeat the entire wargame process with any remaining friendly COAs so that they can capture the advantages and disadvantages of each COA. Once wargaming is complete and the results are captured in the estimates or other documents, the COA analysis is finished and the JPG will begin course of action comparison.
We hope this video helped you visualize some of the course of action analysis steps that you will demonstrate during the joint planning exercise. If you have any questions or comments on this video, please pass them to your DJMO instructor. Thank you.